Lady Gaga has delivered her most acclaimed and beloved album in absolute years. She has obviously seen a lot of mainstream success for a long time and has had a lot of high charting hits for most of her career pretty much. But that hasn't always come with the love, the absolute adoration, and the acclaim that her earliest work did. I mean, albums like Joanne and Chromatica, while weren't necessarily bad albums, just didn't really capture the zeitgeist or capture the love that I think we were expecting to see for, albums such as The Fame Monster. And we expected to kind of continue to see throughout her career, but it just never really quite landed that way. Even art pop, which you'd think maybe would be the one that gets the critics drooling. Ooh, art pop, we love a bit of art pop. Didn't do that either. So she hasn't really had that moment for quite some time, I don't think. But Mayhem is that one. Mayhem is the one. It seems as though fans and critics are kind of uniting here to join in and share the love for Mayhem. And you can kind of see why. It's bringing back that bombast, that zaniness, that weirdness, that quirkiness that made Gaga beloved in the way that separated her from her peers in the first place. So you can definitely understand why this album has kind of had that boost for her. And I was very intrigued with the direction of this album, given the singles. Disease, this epic industrial rock energy that really comes from Nine Inch Nails of all places, if you think about it. Listen to that beat, listen to the way that track is structured. You could absolutely imagine Trent Reznor singing over that beat and it would not sound out of place. Just kind of made me curious to see what on earth she was going with here, and made me wonder, okay, is this going to be something completely new and fresh for Gaga? Then you had Abracadabra, which is an absolute wild, just strange song that takes you to a completely new magical realm. A song that I still don't know if I feel fully positive about. I kind of appreciate that weirdness and the wackiness and how completely out of the blue the whole thing is. But I just can't really get with that chorus, man. I don't know, man. It's just not really sticking with me. I just can't really ride with it. I want to like it. It's one of those songs where I just want to like it because it's just so weird, it's so out there, it's so experimental for something in the mainstream, really, for pop music. And yeah, I just can't really get with it. It's just one of those annoying occurrences. But it still, again, made me wonder where she was taking the album, because I was like, hang on, these two tracks do sound quite out there and bold. What's the album going to be like? And going back to Abracadabra for a second as well, that bridge is great. I really like that bridge. I think that bridge is my favourite part of the whole song, where she's like, ah! She sounds so haunting and strange. It's cool. It's cool. That part's cool. But the actual song itself, I still can't really get with. I don't know. I'm sorry. I want to like it. But it was still enough to get me curious, man. I was like, these two songs, what are we doing here? This is not what we've had from Gaga for a long time, if not ever. So I needed to know what this album was going to be like. But once you sink into the track list itself, for me personally, I'm just a bit I just can't really vibe with a lot of it. I feel like something isn't quite clicking for me. And I also feel like the actual boldness and the extravagance, and even the avant-garde nature that you kind of feel like you're getting into with the album, it's sort of a bit of a mask. And once you kind of take the mask away, you see the real true colours of the album, and it's not really that bold, it's not really that invigorating, it's not really that exciting, and it all kind of just feels a little average to me, particularly musically for me, where it hits a point on the album where you get to Vanish Into You, and later on as well, A Shadow of a Man, and you just start to get this deja vu feeling of I keep hearing this song over and over, this chorus, this explosive sound, and then the dramatic vocals that kind of kick off the chorus is just like copied and pasted throughout the whole album, man. Like, there are a couple of choruses that shy away from it, that don't stick to it. Obviously, I'm not saying every song is exactly the same. I'm not saying every song does exactly the same thing, but there are remarkable similarities, particularly between the choruses and how explosive they are. And again, Lady Gaga's voice kind of doing the same thing. She's obviously got a great voice, but she's kind of using it in the same way, almost identically on every single song. So you just feel like you're hitting the same beat on a musical level. And considering that the album kind of set you up to think you were getting something a bit more bold and a bit more adventurous, to hit a point on the album where you just really feel like you're hearing the same thing kind of over and over is incredibly disappointing. And the mayhem nature of it all becomes weirdly predictable. And you could say, oh, well, it's your expectations. But it's like, when you listen to an album multiple times, the expectations drop away a little bit, and you're just taking the songs for what they are. And when they are kind of just following very similar patterns, it just becomes pretty repetitive to me personally. And yeah, I just feel like a lot of these tracks don't really excite me in the way that I'm thinking they're supposed to. I think Garden of Eden is pretty catchy. I do like that track in terms of how it sounds. I do think musically it's good. I think the beat is kind of very like bringing us back to like 0809 Gaga. Again, this kind of does feel like it could fit on that Fame Monster era, particularly with the beat. And I do think the chorus is at least a little differentiated from some of the others on the album. But that kind of then brings its own flaw within the track list for me, where you're just listening to some of the lyrics and it's just like, I can be your girlfriend for the evening, I can be your boyfriend for the night. And you're just a bit like, this is a bit silly. Like, it's just a little bit silly, and maybe you're not meant to take it too seriously. That's fine, you don't have to, and if you enjoy it, okay, cool. But for me, I'm just like not really all that impressed with what she's going for here lyrically at all. And it's just all a bit like, is there meant to be a theme here tying all this mayhem together? Because I'm struggling to see one, particularly when you do actually sit and read the lyrics. Like, what are these lyrics on this chorus meant to convey? It just sounds like, I don't know, hooking up with somebody, really, which is fine, but cool, I guess. Like, it's not that interesting. That for me kind of sets up another issue for the album for me, where it's just a bit like, when you kind of dig into the layers and peel them back from Lady Gaga, and you see that she's got this kind of like, again, avant-garde nature. She wants to be artistic, she wants to be different from her peers, she wants to kind of present her music in a more grandiose and maybe even at times experimental way. You kind of like peel back those layers and you realize that a lot of her songs are just really kind of basic when you look at the writing. Like, there isn't really a lot of great lyricism here whatsoever, and it kind of borderlines bad at times, actually. Like, you look at a track like How Bad Do You Want Me, which, man, a lot of people have already pointed this out, but this feels straight out of like 1989 era Taylor Swift musically. Like, this shit reeks of that. And it reeks even further when you read the lyrics and you think, holy shit, when Taylor Swift's off her game and she writes a really corny track, this song also sounds like it's pulling from the Taylor Swift playbook as well. Like, these kind of bad girl, you're too much of a good boy and I'm this bad girl, and you're thinking about this bad girl. Oh, how bad do you really want me? It's just like so cringe, man. Like, I just kind of think to myself, like, god damn, surely Lady Gaga has more artistic merit than writing songs like this. And that's the thing for me. It's fine to write a basic pop song. So sometimes you just switch your head off and you just enjoy it for what it is. Not every pop song needs to be lyrically intricate or detailed or have these amazing lyrics. They don't. But with Lady Gaga, I feel like you get gaslit into thinking that her music is way more important and, again, grandiose than it actually is, because you sit through her albums and the deeper cuts and the actual tracks themselves are just really standard pop songs. And that's a disappointing thing for me, because I feel like this album is trying to convey this mayhem energy, this, industrial, weird vibe that, again, you just dig a bit deeper into it and none of that's there, and you're just kind of being tricked into thinking this music is way more weird than it actually is. Like, Jesus Christ, there's nothing weird about this at all. Don't Call Tonight. Like, how is this living on an album where Abracadabra is? Like, this sounds like a song Lady Gaga's made about 10 times before. And you could say, oh yeah, sure, she just wants to kind of bring back those old days and kind of bring back a bit of nostalgia. Fine, sure, cool. But when it feels like an artist is just repeating themselves, that I think is a bit different to nostalgia, or that is different to calling back to something. You know, like when friggin' Timbaland and Justin Timberlake and Nelly Furtado like all jumped on a song. I think it was last year, actually. It wasn't even that long ago. And it just felt like they were trying to bring back the good old days, and it just didn't sound that good. It didn't do that well. It didn't particularly stand out at all. It just sounded like, you know, people kind of bringing back the old days in a really generic way. Like that's clearly different to somebody kind of going, let me kind of bring back my older sound a little bit to kind of please the fans. I think they're two separate entities, and Don't Call Tonight just feels way too much like nostalgia worship and just really trying to, you know, remind the fans that, look, I can still do this sound if you want it, guys. I at least appreciate Killer, because I do think that sounds quite fresh for Gaga, and it's got Gustafsson on the production, which is totally new for her sound, and the kind of funky guitar sounds great. It sounds really slick. The vocals are like, you know, hitting this really cool falsetto, which again she doesn't really do on the album. It just stands out to me as a nice moment where it feels like something a little bit different and cuts through the atmosphere and just brings a bit more fun to it, which I like. It kind of reminds me of something Prince would do, which is probably an obvious comparison, but it's a comparison that works. And yeah, I just like this track just because it feels like she's showing us a little bit of a different side to her, and it's not like trying to be anything that it's not, which I think a lot of this album is doing. It's trying to be something bigger than it really actually is, but it's just like standard Gaga songs, which aren't that really well written, which is sad because you'd think she'd be better at writing than these songs show us. I know I am dogging on a lot of the lyrics on this album, but I can balance that out by saying Perfect Celebrity is at least decently written, I guess. You know, it's not the most groundbreaking thing. It's just basically like a satirical commentary on how people treat celebrities or the expectations of celebrities and that kind of parasocial relationship, I suppose you could call it. You know, it's not a new concept, and it's not, you know, absolutely wow, this blows me away or anything. But on an album where I'm just kind of like lukewarm on a lot of the writing and a lot of the lyrics that pop up, and you know, that kind of thing doesn't really impress me on this album. I'm at least kind of taking something and going, hey, this one at least works for me, I guess. But yeah, you know, you get this, but you also get like Blade of Grass, which comes at the end of the album, which feels very stereotypical for Gaga to do a ballad like this. I feel like, again, we've heard this about 10 times before across her career. We've seen this kind of thing close out albums a bunch of times as well, particularly in mainstream pop. It seems so obvious to finish on the slower ballady type tracks, and yeah, it's just a bit of a shame for these cliches to be so blatantly obvious on an album that I feel, again, is trying to want to make you think it's more extravagant than it really is. Come and wrap that blade of grass and we'll make it last. Just not really feeling it, man, and the way it sounds just sounds really stereotypical and pretty generic to me. No, nothing's really clicking. Nothing's clicking, man. And that's kind of how I can end this review, really. It's just Gaga isn't really presenting me here with something that I feel is particularly unique, and yet I feel like she's so desperately wanting to convince you that it is really unique, and I don't know, it just isn't working for me. Even having Die With A Smile at the end of this album feels like very much anybody would do this, and particularly in the streaming era. You're going to tack on the really popular song at the end of the album just because it's just going to boost the streams. That's literally the only reason it's here. Call me cynical if you will, but this doesn't fit the vibe or the sound of the album. That song also feels more like a Bruno Mars song featuring Gaga to me than it does a Lady Gaga song that should be on a Lady Gaga album. I mean, seriously, like, could anybody really disagree with that? That sound palette is straight out of the Silk Sonic era. It's just you replaced Pac with Gaga. Like, this is not belonging on Mayhem in any way, shape or form. I called it before the album even came out too. I said at the time when it was announced, this makes no sense that it'll be here. I bet it won't fit the sound, and it doesn't. So even Lady Gaga now is a victim of the streaming era kind of strategies and tactics to boost streams and boost sales. Like, come on, man, what are we doing? That song is 7 months old. 7 months old, and it currently is outstreaming all of the tracks on the album by quite a distance. And the album's only just come out, and you're getting a bunch of completely new material from Lady Gaga that you'd think would be getting a lot more streams than a 7-month-old song. Like, of course they were tempted to put it on the album. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, that's a separate thing. I still think Dab as Well is a pretty decent song, so it's not me hating on the song. It's just me hating on the tactics and hating on the fact that I feel like this album is just following a very obvious pattern that you see in a lot of mainstream pop, where it's like the singles will kind of tease you into something that you don't really get with the actual album. And don't get me wrong, I do think Gaga is talented, but I just feel like there is a way we speak about her music that actually doesn't exist in the music itself. A lot of her songs aren't that adventurous, aren't that particularly inventive or avant-garde, but I feel like that's the kind of like conversation we have about Lady Gaga comparatively to her peers, and it just doesn't actually exist in the music, and you feel it on this album. And yeah, I just find it all to be a bit average, really. There's some really good stuff on this album, don't get me wrong, but the actual overall experience from front to back I thought was kind of meh. I'm going to go 5.5 out of 10. I wanted to like it more than I did. There was something about this album that kind of made me feel like I could end up really liking it, but the more and more I played it, the less it did that for me. So that's just how I feel. Yeah, that's just how I feel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please don't unsubscribe and shout at me if you don't like my review. Please tell me what you think of this album. How would you rate it? How would you rank it in her discography too? Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the membership page as well. Check out my Patreon. You can support me overall on those places if you would like to. Do have a good day. Goodbye.